Memphis, Tennessee, March 26, 1960. The plane landed at 7:42 in the morning. Thousands of people had waited all night. Elvis Presley stepped off the plane in his army uniform. Someone pushed through the crowd and handed him a piece of paper. He read it. His face didn't change. He folded it carefully and put it in his breast pocket, right over his heart. Nobody knew what was written on that paper, but Elvis believed it was an attack. His manager didn't know, his bandmates didn't know, the reporters crowding the tarmac didn't know. But that piece of paper would lead to one of the strangest confrontations in music history. A confrontation that took place 3 days later, in a hotel ballroom in Miami Beach, in front of 200 people, between Elvis Presley and the most powerful man in American show business, Frank Sinatra, a man who had once called Elvis a threat to America. And what happened in that ballroom, what was said, what was done, what was refused, would force Frank Sinatra to do something he had never done in 40 years of dominating the entertainment industry. Kneel, not literally, but close enough. This is that story. If you like stories like this, subscribe. 2 years earlier, Elvis Presley had been the most dangerous man in America. Not dangerous like a criminal, dangerous like an idea that couldn't be stopped. He was 23 years old. He had appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show and 60 million people had watched. The cameramen filmed him only from the waist up because the network was afraid of what his hips might do to the nation's teenagers. What they did was make them scream. Parents wrote letters to their senators. Newspapers called him a corrupting influence. Religious leaders called him the devil's instrument. And then at the height of everything, Elvis was drafted. 2 years in the United States Army, Germany, regular barracks, regular duty, no performing. The most famous young man in America disappeared. And while he was gone, Frank Sinatra got to work. Frank Sinatra in 1960 was not a man you said no to. He was 44 years old. He had rebuilt his career from nothing, from being dropped by his record label, from being called washed up, from nearly losing everything into something larger than what he had before. He was the chairman of the board. He controlled Las Vegas. He decided who worked and who didn't. He was, by most accounts, the most powerful man in American entertainment. And he had a problem. His problem had a name: Elvis Presley. Because Frank Sinatra understood, the way powerful people always understand threats before anyone else does, that Elvis wasn't just a trend. Elvis was a replacement, a new thing that made the old thing seem old. And Frank Sinatra could not tolerate being old. So he did what powerful men do when they're afraid. He attacked. In 1957, Frank gave an interview. He called rock and roll the most brutal, ugly, vicious form of expression he had ever heard. He said it appealed to cretinous goons. He said it was sideburn delinquents who listened to it. He didn't name Elvis. He didn't have to. 67 million Americans understood exactly who he meant. And Elvis was in Germany, in uniform, unable to respond. But here's the thing nobody talks about. Elvis read every word. He read it sitting in a diner in Memphis before he shipped out. His guitarist Scotty Moore was with him. He read the whole thing. Then he put the paper down. And Scotty said, "What are you going to say?" Elvis picked up his coffee. "Nothing. Nothing. He just called you a goon in front of the whole country. I know what he called me." And Elvis looked out the window. "Frank Sinatra got called a corrupting influence when he was my age," he said. "Girls fainted at his concerts. Parents wrote letters to their senators. The newspapers said he was destroying American youth." He paused. He forgot what that felt like. Scotty stared at him. "So you're defending him?" "I'm not defending him. I'm saying he forgot, and forgetting is sad." He left money on the table, walked out, never said a public word about Frank Sinatra. Not then, but something was coming. And Frank had no idea, because while Elvis was silent, Frank made one more move, and this one was different. This one was on television. While Elvis was still in Germany, still in uniform, still serving, Frank filmed a television special. He called it "Welcome Home, Elvis." It sounded generous. It was not generous. During the taping, Frank looked into the camera and told 67 million Americans that rock and roll Elvis's music was destructive and ugly and a threat to the nation's youth. 67 million people. And Elvis was in Germany, watching from a distance, saying nothing. That was the paper someone handed him on the tarmac. That was what he folded carefully and put over his heart. 3 days after landing in Memphis, Elvis flew to Miami. His manager, Colonel Tom Parker, had arranged a deal. Elvis would appear on Frank's television show. They would shake hands. They would sing each other's songs. America would watch. Everyone would make money. Parker thought it was business. Elvis had other plans. On the drive to the Fontainebleau Hotel, Elvis was quiet. His guitarist, Scotty Moore, was in the car. Nobody spoke for a long time. Finally, Elvis said, "You know what I've been thinking about?" Scotty said, "No. I've been thinking about what it would feel like to be Frank right now, knowing I was coming, knowing I had a reason to be angry." Scotty waited. "It would feel like waiting for something you deserve," Elvis said. Scotty asked, "Does he deserve it?" Elvis thought about it. "He deserves to be held accountable," he said, "but he doesn't deserve cruelty. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" "Accountability is about truth. Cruelty is about making someone feel small." Elvis looked out the window. "I'm not trying to make Frank feel small. I'm trying to make him feel something true." They pulled up to the hotel. 200 people were waiting inside. Frank expected a kid to walk into that room, a celebrity, a performer. He didn't expect a soldier, but nobody expected what Elvis did next. He walked into the Fontainebleau Hotel ballroom. In his army uniform, not a tuxedo, not stage clothes, not the costume a manager would choose for a television comeback. His uniform, dog tags visible at his collar. The wardrobe department had a black tuxedo ready. Measurements had been taken. Everything was prepared. Elvis looked at the tuxedo and wore what he was already wearing. The room felt it immediately. 200 cynical entertainment industry people who had seen every kind of entrance, every kind of manipulation, felt something they hadn't expected. Authenticity. The photographers moved toward Elvis before Frank's people could redirect them. Frank saw it happen. He walked across the room, extended his hand. "Welcome home, soldier." Elvis shook it. "Thank you, Mr. Sinatra." Not Frank, not Chairman, Mr. Sinatra. 2 words. Frank's eyes narrowed, just slightly, but it was noticed. If this story is surprising you, hit the like button. It genuinely helps videos like this reach more people. The rehearsal started at 4 p.m. The plan was simple. Frank would sing "Love Me Tender," Elvis's song. Elvis would sing "Witchcraft," Frank's song. A gesture of mutual respect, safe, controlled, exactly what Frank's show needed. Frank went first. He sang "Love Me Tender" the way Frank sang everything. Flawlessly, precisely, with complete mastery of the room. The musicians nodded with appreciation. It was good. It was Sinatra. Then Elvis walked to the microphone. The band started "Witchcraft." Elvis stopped them after 4 bars. "I'd like to change the arrangement." The room went quiet. Not immediately, like a ripple spreading outward from the stage until it reached the farthest table, where a television executive stopped mid-sentence and turned to look. Frank Sinatra stood up. He walked toward the stage, slowly, every step saying, "This is my room, this is my show, I am coming to explain how things work here." He stopped at the edge of the stage, looked up at Elvis. "This is my show." His voice was low, controlled. "My arrangements don't change." Elvis looked down at him. No hostility, no challenge, just steadiness. "I understand that, Mr. Sinatra, and I appreciate you having me, but I'd like to do something a little different, if that's all right with you." "It's not all right with me." Elvis met his eyes. "Then I'll do it anyway, and we can discuss it afterward." 200 people stopped breathing. Frank Sinatra's face went through 3 expressions in 4 seconds. Shock, rage, and then something more complicated. Calculation. Frank was doing the math. If I fight this, what do I win? If I sit down, what do I lose? He had never asked that question before. He had never needed to. 5 seconds of silence. Then Frank Sinatra sat back down, picked up his drink, nodded at the band leader. Let him do what he wants. And what Elvis did with that song, nobody in that room expected. He sang "Witchcraft," Frank's song. Frank's standard, but not the way Frank sang it. Not sophisticated, not ironic, not controlled. He sang it like a man who had grown up listening to gospel in a church in Tupelo, Mississippi. He sang it like someone for whom music was never about elegance, it was about truth. It was different from Frank's version. The musicians in the room knew immediately it was better. Not technically. Frank's technique was perfect and would always be perfect, but better in the way that matters most. More honest. When Elvis finished, the room was silent. Then Frank Sinatra stood up and applauded, slowly at first, then quickly. Frank Sinatra, who sat while other people performed, who clapped when he felt like it and never when he didn't, stood up and applauded a 25-year-old kid who had just taken his song and made it into something different. Something he hadn't known was in it. After the rehearsal, Frank found Elvis backstage, not the other way around. Frank sought him out. He pulled a chair next to Elvis, sat down. "That was good," Frank said, "what you did with Witchcraft." "Thank you. I mean it. You found something in it I didn't know was there." A silence. Then Frank said, "I said some things about rock and roll." "Yes, Some of those things were about you. I know. Why didn't you respond? When I called you a goon, when I said your music was ugly, you had every platform in the world. You could have destroyed me." Elvis looked at him for a long moment. "Because you were scared," Elvis said. Frank stared. "I was what? Scared?" "When you said those things, you were scared the same way the newspapers were scared when you started. The same way parents were scared when girls fainted at your concerts." Frank's jaw tightened. "You forgot that you'd been the thing people were afraid of," Elvis said. A very long silence. "I didn't think of it that way," Frank said finally. "I know, that's why I didn't respond. You can't be angry at a man for forgetting, but you can be sad for him." Frank Sinatra looked at this 25-year-old kid in his army uniform, and something happened on Frank's face that people who knew him said they had never seen. He was ashamed, and then Frank asked him a question nobody expected. "Why didn't you fight back? Not publicly, not in the press, but here, tonight, you had every right. Why did you come here and make it easy for me?" Elvis was quiet for a moment. "Because I don't want you to feel small," he said. "I want you to feel something true." Frank didn't answer. He sat with that. Then he said, quietly, "What's the truth?" Elvis looked at him. "That we're not enemies. We're the same thing at different times. You were me in 1943. I'm you in 1956. The only difference is you forgot, and I'm here to remind you. The taping happened at 5 p.m. 67 million Americans watched. They saw Frank welcome Elvis home. They saw them shake hands. They saw them sing each other's songs. They saw what looked like two stars burying a feud. They didn't see the hallway. They didn't see Frank Sinatra, the chairman of the board, the most powerful man in American entertainment, sitting in a folding chair next to a 25-year-old kid, being told a truth he had needed to hear for 3 years. 3 weeks after the show aired, Frank gave an interview. He said, "I was wrong about Presley." He said, "I said things about his music that were unfair and inaccurate." He said, "I expected a kid. I found a man." Elvis read the interview in the same Memphis diner where he'd read the original attack. Scotty Moore was with him again. "You going to respond?" Scotty asked. Elvis put the magazine down. He said what he needed to say. Elvis said, "That's enough. If stories like this, the ones that never made the front page, are what you're looking for, subscribe. We find them every week." After Elvis died in 1977, Priscilla found something in his bedroom at Graceland. In a drawer, folded once, the crease worn from repeated handling, the newsprint slightly yellowed. It was the paper from the tarmac. The paper someone had handed him when he stepped off the plane. The paper he had folded carefully and put in his breast pocket, right over his heart. It was a transcript of Frank Sinatra's 1960 television speech, the one about rock and roll being brutal and ugly and destructive. The one 67 million people had watched while Elvis was in Germany, unable to respond. On the back, in Elvis's handwriting, were 6 words. He forgot. I won't forget. Not a threat, not a vow of revenge, just a reminder to himself. To remember what it felt like before the fame, before the power, before the machinery of celebrity that wants to make you forget where you came from and what the music was for. He won't forget. He didn't. And in a hotel ballroom in Miami, on a Tuesday afternoon in March 1960, he reminded someone else to remember too. Frank Sinatra called Elvis a threat to America. Elvis's response was 6 words in a hallway. And patience. And the refusal to make a powerful man feel small when the truth was enough. That patience put Frank Sinatra on his knees. Not in defeat, in recognition. The most powerful man in the room sat back down and listened. And Frank Sinatra never forgot it.